So, my wife and I still joke about it sometimes, even though deep down, neither of us actually think it's funny. This happened about 5 years ago, right after our wedding. We'd just gotten married in Denver, and instead of flying somewhere, we decided to do this little road trip through the Rockies for our honeymoon. You know, just the two of us. Winding roads, old motels, that kind of thing. We thought it'd be peaceful, romantic even. But that trip ended up being the most unnerving experience either of us have ever had. It started the second night. We were driving through this narrow mountain pass, the kind that doesn't even show up properly on Google Maps. It was around 10 p.m. and the sky was one of those deep, endless blues. We hadn't seen another car in hours. The air outside was cold and the road just twisted through fog and silence. Then my wife, Emily, pointed something out on the right side of the road. At first, I thought it was just an animal or a fallen branch. But as the headlights hit it, I realized it was a person. She was standing near the ditch, right at the edge of the guardrail, wearing what looked like a white dress. The fabric was torn, dirty, like she'd been dragged through mud. Her hair was long and dark, and there was something over her face. A veil. Emily gasped, "Oh my God, stop the car." I pulled over to the shoulder a few feet ahead, my hands gripping the wheel. "Did you see that?" I asked, and she nodded, already unbuckling her seatbelt. But when we both looked back, she was gone. There was no sound except for the engine idling and the faint hum of crickets. Emily got out, calling out, "Mom, are you okay?" Her voice echoed down the road. No answer. I stepped out too, shining my phone flashlight toward the ditch. The grass was wet and uneven, and there was this faint smell of something metallic, like old rain and rust. That's when I noticed something strange. Muddy footprints on the asphalt, small and bare, leading from the ditch to the side of our car. Emily noticed them too and went pale. "Those weren't there before," she whispered. We followed the trail with our eyes. They stopped right by the passenger door, her door. And that was it. The footprints just ended there. I didn't say anything. I just opened the door for Emily and told her to get in. We locked the doors and drove off fast, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank. Or, I don't know, someone walking home from a wedding. But who the hell wears a veil out there, in the middle of nowhere, past midnight? We drove another hour until we reached this small roadside motel. It was one of those single-story places with flickering neon signs and an office that smelled like stale coffee. The clerk was this old guy who didn't look surprised when I asked if there were any other guests. He just shook his head. "Not many folks drive that road anymore," he said. "Too many accidents." We didn't ask what he meant. We just took our key, parked the car, and hauled our bags inside. The room looked like it hadn't been touched since the 80s. Floral bedspread, buzzing AC, wood paneling. I was exhausted, but Emily couldn't stop pacing. She kept looking through the blinds at the parking lot. I told her to try to get some sleep. Eventually, she laid down beside me, and we drifted off sometime around 1 a.m. I woke up just before dawn. The room was dim and quiet, except for the occasional rumble of a truck far off on the highway. I got up to use the bathroom, but when I walked past the window, I froze. There were muddy footprints outside the glass. Not just one or two, a whole trail of them. They led from the far end of the parking lot, right up to our window. Small, bare prints, the same shape as the ones we'd seen on the road. I leaned closer and realized something else. They weren't fresh. They looked old, dried, like they'd been there for days, maybe even weeks. But there hadn't been any when we checked in. I woke Emily immediately. She stumbled over, bleary-eyed, then saw them and just whispered, "No." We packed up in 10 minutes flat. I didn't even shower. We just wanted to get out of there. When we dropped off the keys, I mentioned the footprints to the clerk, trying to sound casual. He didn't even blink. "Oh, those again?" he muttered. "They show up sometimes after rain." "Don't worry about it." I asked him what he meant, and he sighed, rubbing his temple. Back in the 80s, a couple wrecked their car on that mountain road. Bride and groom. The car flipped into the ditch. He died instantly. She didn't. Poor thing crawled half a mile in her wedding dress, looking for help. Folks say she never made it. He looked at us, studying our faces. They called it the Bride Road after that. Emily and I just stared at each other, speechless. I didn't even respond. We just got into the car and drove. For the rest of the trip, neither of us mentioned what happened that night. But something had shifted. A heaviness hung between us, like a secret we didn't agree to keep, but couldn't speak about either. Even months later, when we looked back at the photos from the trip, something always felt off. The lighting in those pictures from that night looked strange. A sort of pale glow around the edges of the frame, like mist. In one shot of the car, if you zoom in, there's a faint handprint smudged against the passenger door. Emily swore it wasn't hers. A year later, I looked it up online. Bride Road, Colorado accident. There were old newspaper articles, grainy photos of the wreckage, even a small local forum where people shared their own encounters. Most said they'd seen a woman in white by the ditch late at night. Some said she'd appear in their rearview mirror, her veil fluttering like it was caught in a breeze. One guy wrote that he'd seen her face reflected in his window while driving, and when he blinked, she was gone. And the footprints. Apparently, they're seen outside that same motel all the time, always after rain, always by the windows of couples. I didn't tell Emily what I found. She doesn't like to talk about that night anymore. But every now and then, when we're driving through mountain roads and fog starts to settle in, she reaches over and turns off the music. She'll grip my arm, just for a second, and whisper, "Did you see that?" And every time, my heart skips, because no matter how many years pass, I still don't know if what we saw that night was real, or if the bride of that road is still out there, waiting for someone else to stop and ask if she's okay. This happened last summer, on my way home from a work trip in Nevada. I was driving alone, late at night, cutting through this long stretch of desert highway where there's basically nothing. No lights, no houses, just open road and radio static. It was one of those nights where even your own headlights look lonely. I'd been driving for about 3 hours straight and was maybe 40 minutes from home when I saw something up ahead. A car pulled over to the shoulder, hazard lights blinking faintly through the heat haze. Normally, I might have kept driving, but the guy standing next to it was waving both arms, trying to flag someone down. He looked stranded, mid-30s maybe, wearing jeans and a faded jacket. His car hood was up, and there was steam rising from the engine. I slowed down, rolled my window halfway. "You okay?" I called out. He nodded quickly, walking closer. "Yeah, I think it's the radiator. I've been out here an hour. No service." There was something polite about him, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. It was forced, like he was trying too hard not to look desperate. I offered, "I can call roadside when I get service. You need water or anything?" He shook his head, then glanced past me at the back of my car. "Actually, could you maybe give me a lift to the next exit? It's just 15 minutes up the road." I hesitated. It was dark. I was alone. Still, I didn't want to seem cruel. I told him, "I'm sorry, I can't, but I'll call someone for you once I get a signal." He looked disappointed, nodded, and backed away, mumbling thanks. I put the car in drive and pulled out slowly, watching in the mirror as he waved one last time. By the time I checked again, he was gone. I remember thinking maybe he'd walked around the car or gone to grab something, but whatever. I just wanted to get home. About 20 minutes later, I started feeling uneasy. Not scared exactly, but aware, like someone was watching me. Every little sound inside the car, a creak, a shift of weight, even the air conditioning, started to feel louder. My brain tried to rationalize it. The road was rough. The car was full of luggage, but that feeling wouldn't go away. When I finally pulled into my driveway around 12:30 a.m., I was exhausted. I grabbed my bag, locked the car, and went straight inside. My house was dark and quiet, the way I liked it. I showered, got ready for bed, and that's when I heard it. My car alarm blaring outside. It was sudden and shrill, echoing through the whole neighborhood. I looked out the window and saw the lights flashing, horn blaring. I grabbed my keys and clicked the fob. The alarm stopped. I figured maybe a cat or raccoon brushed against it. But then, not even 10 minutes later, it went off again. This time, my heart was racing. I looked outside and noticed something strange. The trunk light was flickering, like it wasn't fully closed. I turned on the porch light, stepped outside slowly, and hit the unlock button on my key. The alarm stopped again. I walked closer to the car. Everything looked normal, except that the trunk lid was slightly ajar, just enough to catch the beam of the porch light. I stood there for a second, telling myself it was probably luggage shifting around. Still, I reached forward and lifted the trunk. Nothing, just my duffel bag and a small toolbox. I shut it tight, locked the car again, and went inside. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself it was all in my head, until I checked my dash cam. I keep one mounted on the rearview mirror. It records the front and rear simultaneously. I mainly bought it for long trips, just in case of accidents. I plugged the memory card into my laptop and started scrolling through the footage. The first hour looked normal. Long stretches of empty highway, occasional signs flashing by. Then I reached the part where I'd stopped to help that stranded driver. You could see him clearly, walking toward my window, talking to me, gesturing at his car. Then I started driving away. But a few seconds later, in the corner of the rear camera, he didn't wave goodbye. He sprinted forward. The footage showed him running toward my car from the side, crouching low, then vanishing from the frame. For a few seconds, the road was empty. Then, faint movement near the back, the trunk lid lifting just an inch. And then, he climbed in. My stomach dropped. I scrubbed the footage back and forth, hoping I'd imagined it. But no, it was clear as day. He had waited until I turned my head to check the mirror, then slipped into my trunk. I watched the next hour in stunned silence. Every time I hit a bump, the trunk light flickered faintly. He was in there the entire drive. The footage ended when I parked in my driveway. You could see me getting out, grabbing my bag, locking the doors. The rear camera stayed on for another 5 minutes after that. That's when I saw it. The trunk opened slowly, just an inch, and a hand appeared, pale, shaking slightly. Then, instead of climbing out, he pulled the lid back down. That was when the alarm must have gone off. He'd been trying to open it quietly. I skipped ahead in the footage to the second alarm. This time, he did climb out. He stepped out of the trunk barefoot, looked around, and walked out of frame toward the side of the house. And then, nothing. The camera kept rolling, but he never came back into view. I called the police right after that. They came within minutes, took the footage, and searched the entire property. They found a few muddy footprints by the fence, but nothing else. No sign of him. One of the officers said it wasn't the first time something like that had happened. Apparently, there had been a few similar reports in nearby states. Drivers stopping for someone stranded, then later finding evidence that the person had hidden in their trunk to follow them home.